this afternoon's workshop. I want to acknowledge the Lekwungen peoples as represented today by the Esquimalt and Songhees nations, from whose traditional territories we are broadcasting. We recognize and respect the First Nations governments across the region and the province. Before we begin, I want to provide delegates with a quick overview of the virtual format. At the top of your session screen, you will see two tabs, Stream and Engage. The Stream tab is where you can view the session and presentation slides. This is the page you are likely viewing right now. The Engage tab is where you can submit questions for our presenters. Once you have submitted your question in the Engage tab, you will need to click back to the Stream tab to continue viewing the workshop. Please remember to sign your question with your full name, elected position, and local government or First Nation. Your question will not be approved if you do not include your information. As a reminder to delegates, as per the conference rules and procedures, only elected officials have the privilege of the floor. So let's start our session. COVID-19 has had global reach affecting every order of government, community, individual, and every facet of society. This session will showcase how some BC communities have responded, highlighting what actions have been taken to support local economic recovery efforts. Our presenters will share their success stories and lessons learned to assist other communities in BC as BC restarts its economy. Presenters will also share tips and resources on what communities can do to build back better and stronger, making themselves more resilient to future disasters. We will commence with a presentation from Dale Wheeldon, President and CEO of the BC Economic Development Association. Dale will present on the BC Economic Disaster Resilience and Recovery Program. Following Dale, we will hear from economic development staff from across BC, Quesnel, Surrey, Northern Rockies, and Campbell River, who will all share their stories. So now I'd like to start the session by welcoming our first presenter, Dale Wheeldon, President and CEO of the BC Economic Development Association. Dale Wheeldon brings 30-plus years of knowledge and a varied background in economic development and local government. With years of experience in both rural communities and a major city in British Columbia, Dale understands the unique challenges and opportunities differing-sized communities face. Since 2007, as president of the BC Economic Development Association, Dale and his team have developed extensive disaster recovery programs that are used throughout Canada, the U.S., and Asia. Welcome, Dale.
Thanks very much for the introduction. It's great to be here with everybody. I want to thank, first of all, UBCM for asking me to participate today. I originally started going to UBCM back in the 1980s when I was a young municipal politician in Iqaluit. I have a great deal of respect for municipal politicians, not respect for all politicians, but in general, I really respect municipal politicians for the work that they do in their communities. I know how important UBCM is, and some of the most educational sessions and that I've ever attended were at UBCM. So it's just really happy that UBCM reached out and asked for us to work with them on putting this panel together. I'm going to start off I'm going to give you a bit of an introduction of the BC Economic Development Association's economic disaster resiliency and recovery program that we started back in 2012 as a leader in economic disaster recovery in Canada. We started first with the Burns Lake, following the Burns Lake mill explosion, working with local and Indigenous communities up there to develop a disaster recovery plan. Since then, we've worked on developing the U.S. government economic recovery framework under the Obama administration back in 2013, developed a program for Alberta following the flooding, worked with our partners at Fortis BC and Pacific Coastal Airlines to establish a hotline in 2017 and 2018, and developed some short-term and long-term recovery plans for Grand Forks following the flooding in 2018. Internationally, we've done work in the Virgin Islands, Cambodia, the Mariana Islands. We've now started to do some work for the state of Hawaii, assisting them with some programs, and the U.S. government funds those volunteer efforts. During COVID-19, starting back in March 11th, when the global pandemic was declared. It was the day after the BC Economic Summit. And believe me, we stressed throughout the whole summit as to whether we'd get through it. We did. But right on the 11th, we jumped into action with our disaster recovery program. We are well set up. Our website's set up in the background that we could go live, and we went live the next day, basically with producing live documents available on our website for both businesses and local governments. That particular document was shared by many local governments, by financial institutions. Fan City used it as their primary resource for businesses. We had a large number of provincial agencies, federal agencies, and others use our document on their websites to be able to keep businesses up to date on the programs that were changing, and and for local governments as well. At any given time during the day, at any minute, we could log in and we could see 80 to 500 people in the document looking at the different resources that were available. We had a dedicated website for businesses and another one for communities. We started hosting webinars and provided some initial guidance to communities on what to do during the shutdown and to lead towards a strong economy in the recovery phase. We updated our resiliency and recovery manuals, and we launched a condensed version, and that's available on our website. And I believe UBCM also has a copy on their website. We offered support to the province. It's offered. We were part of the COVID business cabinet. We provided one-on-one assistance to the communities when asked. We've launched surveys for communities to use for their short and long-term, to get a better understanding of their short and long-term needs of businesses. We also approached Think First out of Victoria to expand their network, their Shop Local program, Support Local BC, outside of the Victoria area, out throughout the entire province. And we're really happy that happened, and with the great support of Van City and with NDIT, NDIP came on and helped fund communities in the northern region to be part of the program. And over $500,000 has now been purchased in gift cards for businesses at the local level. We've also revised all of our training programs to incorporate the COVID-19 impacts and some of the recovery work. During our efforts in BC that we've done, everything that we've done in BC, it's become very clear that local governments, while having emergency management plans in place, many are not properly planned for economic recovery following a disaster. We reviewed a number of plans, and it showed that 90% do not adequately address the needs for businesses and economic recovery during and after a disaster. We've been trying to persuade local and provincial governments that we need to be better prepared to address the economic impacts of any disaster. Recovery plans need to include some key information, including revising the community risk assessments to make sure that it incorporates different things, business community engagement, business centers for economic recovery, business reentry programs, business financing. And maybe the community can't do the financing, but can work with financial institutions to make sure you're aware of what services they provide so that the businesses can be informed. Capacity building, making sure that all community agencies and volunteer networks in the community have the capacity and the knowledge needed to jump in the event of a disaster. Workforce planning, what's going to happen to our workforce in a disaster, land and building reuse and redevelopment if an area gets burnt, or obviously not just COVID, but in other disasters, what happens? How do you reuse that property? A communication strategy, and many times I think I should just move this to number 1 instead of number 9. This is not in any specific order, but communications are so important, and we all paid attention to the daily press conferences from our health officer during COVID, but communication, and that was so important for us to be aware of what was going on. But communication strategy is so important. Who's going to lead it? Who's going to talk about it? And I think the mayors and councils play, a really, really important role in the communications during and after a disaster. And then also federal and provincial programs for recovery. What are they? What is available? We can't just depend on provincial programs or federal programs to help in the event of a disaster. And we need to be aware of what those programs are. And we need to know what some of the shortfalls are. And there's lots, and you can ask communities like Grand Forks as to what are some of those gaps when it comes to the federal and provincial programs. When we talk disasters, though, I got to admit that even though we encourage people to prepare for wildfires, floods, typhoons, we never really anticipated a pandemic. And a pre-disaster plan would have helped many of our communities deal with the economic impacts. In reality, it would have been hard to completely prepare for the impacts that have been brought to us by COVID-19. Some would say that it's been a destruction of our economy, but it's hard sometimes, but I'd like to think positively that it really is an opportunity that's presented itself to us on how we can transform our economies to be more resilient than we were before and to create a different type of community. Every industry, every profession is conducting those self-examinations on how to reset and accelerate into the future, and local governments are no different. They're looking at different ways to conduct community and business engagement. We look at medical industries, health, the educational industries, and the transformation of those into how they're reaching citizens throughout the province and globally. And then, of course, those small businesses, the hearts of our communities, they're reimagining new products, new supply chains, discovering how to do more with technology and focusing on the different ways of satisfying consumer and customer needs. So it's true that every crisis comes an opportunity, and we as economic developers, and you'll see that in the presentations following, and community leaders look at what we can do to transform for the future economy. Conducting business outreach should be number one. Developing training programs to support entrepreneurial growth and other creative solutions for working with small, medium, and large businesses in our communities have all been rethought at this time, and new programs are being developed, some of which you'll hear about today. Even BCDA has got involved in entrepreneurial development through a unique partnership with Spring through an entrepreneur resiliency program first started in Campbell River. Never in the past has more communities realized that economic development must start at home, supporting what we have and growing from within. Local governments have been in some cases scrambling to establish innovative programs to support local businesses, whether it's by increasing the outreach and creating linkages to overcome challenges, changing bylaws that allows drinking on the beach, or building outdoor patios, working with existing manufacturers to adopt to manufacturing PPE, or speeding up the approval processes to encourage development. While we don't often think about how many businesses may not be aware of the types of assistance that are out there, there are ways that we need to work with businesses to make sure that they're informed. Local governments can help businesses in a variety of ways, and it's important that we look at what they are rather than assuming that the municipal charter says we can't do it. We can, and I would encourage those wondering how to reach out to the ministry and ask the questions, what can and can't be done. But it really all starts with communications. We can understand the challenges. When I think of what Quesnel has done in reaching out to their businesses, working with Community Futures and the local government working together to find out what the challenges are and what supports are needed. It's amazing what we find out. We can find the creative ways that we can help and to create our own best practices in our communities. It's been amazing to me how when I've talked to businesses that they don't understand how to access the programs that are out there, or to even think the programs are not even for them. Education is important, not only for businesses directly, but also for us to better understand how we can help. For decades, the emphasis on economic development has been to attract new businesses. That's the old way of doing economic development, not the way that successful communities have been pursuing for a number of years. Working with what you have will enhance your ability to attract the new. It drives new investment from outside by showing you have a growing and thriving business community existing already in your community. While COVID-19, we're seeing communities realize that strategies need to be redesigned and budgets reallocated to deploy creative solutions. Governments are realizing the need to invest in broadband, promote startups, developing talent and resident attraction, developing and supporting underserved communities, building partnerships with the neighboring Indigenous communities, involving young adults to be invested in and engaged in the community, or collaborating with other partners and other economic developers and local leaders in the regions. These investments should be the central elements in promoting the new normal for community economic development and will result in a win-win strategy. The pandemic's reinforced the opportunity of remote working and automation that will alter business and government decision-making and change the landscape of our business communities. There will likely be less office space demand for the foreseeable future and potentially fewer employees in some sectors. That is why we need to change our downtowns and communities into entrepreneurial ecosystems. Some communities have turned vacant buildings into co-working spaces, maker spaces, pop-up spaces for future entrepreneurs and existing businesses. We've been suggesting these things for years. Local governments can facilitate these changes in partnerships with community and regional agencies. As we've been saying for years, economic developers and local leaders should work with the community and businesses to make sure that you're better prepared for the next disaster. There's no such thing as a 500-year flood or a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, because the new normal is for disasters. Sometimes they're annually, sometimes they're monthly. It's clear anything can happen and will happen. It's not if, but when another disaster will come to our communities, and we need to be prepared. Those disasters work to win. They work hard to win, and they'll keep pushing until they do if we allow them. Together, we got to work together to make sure that they don't win and that we can react and with well-designed preparation plans and innovative business supports. Without businesses, we have no jobs. Without jobs, we have no residents. And without residents, we have no community. We will continue to encourage change at the provincial level. In the meantime, I encourage all local governments to download the toolkit, the new condensed version that we have available on our website or on the UBCM website. It's called Economic Recovery and Resiliency Toolkit, and it's available for anyone, and you do not need to be a member to get your hands on this. Someday the pandemic will be over, and when it is, we'll look back and talk about how we created more vibrant communities for us all. And in order to do that, we need to reset our communities to be better prepared and sustainable for the future. The communities that you're going to hear from after me, which have all designed and developed programs based on COVID or based on other impacts. Maybe it's a change in their employment base. How can they transform their communities to keep going following any type of a disaster? Because a disaster just isn't a pandemic. A disaster is a loss of a major employer, it's a fire, it's a flood. So these communities have done creative things. I know Quesnel has done a number of things after wildfires and of course with COVID, and they've done it in partnership and everything that they do. In Campbell River, we see communities that their economic development program has just created some incredible programs that are touching so many sectors of the economy. We look at the city of Surrey and their PPE program. That was just one of many, many initiatives that the city of Surrey has done to encourage economic growth from within, but also by attracting new. But they've done that through well-planned and thought out processes. And then Northern Rockies, a community being hit with the loss with the impacts in the forest industry, and what are they doing now and what are they planning to do in the future. I'm hoping that you'll take some good messages from them. And as always, we are available for a call or for emails. If you ever need anything, BCDA looks forward to working with you. I'll pass it over to the moderator.
Thank you very much, Dale. So speaking of Quesnel, next up, please welcome Amy Reed and Greg Lawrence. Amy is the Manager of Economic Development and Tourism at the City of Quesnel, And joining Amy is Greg Lawrence, and he is the General Manager of Community Futures North Caribou. Amy and Greg, over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Lindbergh. So I'm Amy Reid, Manager of Economic Development and Tourism with the City of Quesnel, and I'm sitting a safe distance away from Greg Lawrence from Community Futures in the Community Futures boardroom. And we're going to talk to you today about how we set up a business support hotline in the very early days of the pandemic. But before getting into that, I just want to give a little background on the situation in Quesnel when the pandemic hit. This wasn't our first crisis or our first disaster that we have experienced. We had had 2 mill closures of major employers in the previous decade, as well as a number of shift curtailments prior to the pandemic. We went through the biggest wildfires ever in the history of the province in 2017, and then again in 2018. We didn't have, we weren't evacuated out of the city, but there were alerts in the city and people were evacuated in the surrounding area. The highway was shut down, leading to Quesnel just south of town. So the business community certainly felt the impact of those events. And then in 2018, we had a major infrastructure replacement project in Main Street revitalization in our downtown, which is fantastic now that it's complete, but was a real hit to the businesses as they went through that during the summer months of 2018. So when COVID came, it was a hit on top of a hit, on top of a hit, on top of a hit. I think the good thing that has come out of that, if we're going to look on the bright side, is that our business support community has pulled together before. This wasn't the first time that we'd had to come together. We knew who our key players were, we knew our strengths, and we knew how to work together. So actually when the pandemic hit, we were just about to launch a business retention survey in our community, working together with Community Futures and the Chamber of Commerce. In the city of Quesnel, we're a little bit rare in that we have not 1 or 2, but 3 business improvement areas. And they work really well together, which is maybe even more rare. And they've also worked well together with the city and the Chamber and Community Futures in the past. So we knew who our key players were. So when the pandemic hit in mid-March, we called together the first of many Zoom meetings on March 25th and had our business support hotline up and running 2 weeks later on April 9th. Over to you.
Thanks, Amy. Hi, Lorianne. Just be silly for a second there. I guess the thing we started with is we had a very clear shared objective. We wanted to maximize the dollars, the COVID dollars that were accessed by our business community. We knew from our experience with wildfire response and with helping people to access Red Cross supports that as Dale mentioned, and just to reiterate that, businesses are either not aware, or they don't think programs are for them, or they're afraid of the paperwork involved in applying for programs. So it really doesn't matter how much advertising you do, you really just can't expect to advertise and have businesses to call into us or into you. We knew that we needed to reach out in person. This was a little bit different from wildfire because unlike the wildfire response where we physically visited people in their homes or businesses, we knew we couldn't do that. We knew we had to contact people over the phone. And that would cause some challenges from a technology perspective, particularly since all of our callers were working in their own homes. So we got together, did some planning. We knew that we needed people to make the calls, technology to allow people to work collaboratively from home, and coordination and support for those callers. So starting with people, the main partners in this were myself and Amy, or the City of Quesnel and Community Futures. We kind of got the ball rolling, and we were very fortunate at that point in time that we had a little bit of excess capacity in our organization. We had a very experienced staff person who could kind of take the lead around coordination. So it was Amy, myself, and Ziggy who played the main organizing role in this. And then as Amy mentioned, we had the city, the Chamber of Commerce, the 3 business associations, and the municipality of Wells, who all had a little bit of, at that point in time, a little bit of slack staff time because we were all sort of sent home and wondering what to do. So we had the people power to get started with, which was really important. One of the first things we did is we needed to set up some kind of a phoning system that would allow people to call into one number and that would allow all of us to be able to answer those calls in our home and to set up a switchboard. I think everybody's familiar with VoIPs or voice over internet phone systems. I guess we looked around the room and we said, who's the oldest guy in the room? And I stuck up my hand and I got in charge of putting that technology together. So I don't know if that was a wise decision, but that's how we went. That VoIP allowed us to have a common number, a messaging service, and allowed us to set up call queues so that when we were working with the volunteers, those calls were automatically routed to the volunteers who were on call at that point in time. We also recognized that we needed client relations management software, and Amy came forward with the BC Business Counts program, which was very useful for this purpose. The BC Business Counts people were very helpful. They helped us to set up a survey for the initial contact that allowed the callers to enter the key information into our database, allowed us to do referrals and tracking of follow-ups in a structured way, and allowed us to have a reporting system that we could keep track of the results of the program. And then lastly, from a technology perspective, we used Google Drive to have shared documents. So all of our current policies and procedures were all in one place where callers could access them. In regards to the actual implementation of the program, the city, the Chamber of Commerce, and ourselves each had business contact listings. And our coordinator went through all of those and compiled them. So at the end of it all, we had quite a complete list of all of the businesses in the community along with their contact information. We also went through and created a sort of a live database of funding and support programs. And that was updated on a daily basis, and our call support team used that when they were working with businesses. We had a survey and a script for the call team, and that was all input into the CRM as they were making those calls. And they were all kept organized by Ziggy. They had a weekly call list, and there were regular check-ins with the call team just to make sure they were comfortable to answer any questions they might have and to ensure that everyone was aware of any of the new programs as they rolled out. After the initial round of calls, I guess a couple months later, Amy, we had a second round of follow-up calls. And really that was because we recognized that so many programs had changed, and we wanted to, one, to ensure that people were aware of the new programs, two, to find out if they were able to access the programs from before and whether they needed any additional help, and also to start collecting some statistics so that we'd have a sense of how successful this program was. And that information was all, again, input through BC Business Council, and that's where we got our reporting from. And that leads us back to Amy.
Yeah, so on to those statistics and results. In the end, we called about 775 businesses. So we have just over 1,000 business licenses in Quesnel. We removed multifamily housing, which have business licenses. We removed the businesses that are located well outside of the Quesnel area. And we removed doctors, lawyers, and accountants because we didn't think that they needed our help. We called every other business on the business license list. We ended up connecting and assisting about 220 businesses. And as Greg said, we called all of those businesses back a second time and reconnected the second round with about 150 of those businesses. From that, we found that the businesses on average accessed about $16,000 with our assistance. So we estimate that we helped the business community to access about $4.1 million in provincial and federal supports and counting. It's still going up. I think some of the keys to our success with this program were, first of all, being able to use those existing resources, having boards or councils that resource our organizations so that we're able to take on these initiatives and be flexible with our staff time. Also, the lesson learned from wildfires, that in a crisis situation, businesses are overwhelmed and they don't want to ask for help. After the wildfires, we had one fund from Red Cross, and businesses really struggled with that. This time there were multiple funds and they were changing rapidly. If we had just opened the hotline and waited for businesses to call us, we wouldn't have helped very many people. So doing that outreach really made a difference in the success of the program. And last, I'll go back to the first thing I said, having those established relationships really helped us. Greg and I have been talking as we've been putting this presentation together, and we know not every community has a strong relationship with with their community futures and their economic development staff. And Greg and I are lucky that we talk regularly. We sometimes work together. Sometimes we just know when to stay out of each other's way. And that could be just as valuable. But it starts with a conversation, and it's hard if that first conversation is in the middle of a crisis. So I think that would be my one recommendation to take back, is to start with those conversations now before the next crisis hits. That's it from us.
And done.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Amy and Greg. Okay, yes, I'm from Quesnel, but part of what happened during this whole piece that Amy and Greg talked about, my other job is the executive director of one of the 3 BIAs in Quesnel. And so I was actually able to be part of this team early in March. And it was truly an amazing team effort. When you think within 2 weeks, we had a hotline set up, we had call scripts ready, we had programs that were placed in front of us that we could talk to all the various businesses about. And it's true, early on in that piece, the programs were changing on a daily basis. It was amazing how staff was able to keep us updated. And the calls that I made, I know that people were so appreciative of the fact that we would even think of calling, some of these smaller businesses that were shut down, and we were able to talk to them and go, listen, you're able to apply for this and this program. You're having problems applying? Don't worry, we got somebody at the office there who can help you. So it was one of those programs that I think, as Amy said, back during the wildfires, people didn't realize they were eligible for any of the funding that was available. This program, like she said, brought in over $4 million to our community, and that's huge for a community that's the size of about 10,000 people. So thank you very much, Amy and Greg, for that. So now please join me in welcoming Stephen Wu, Manager of Economic Development for the City of Surrey. Over the past 7 years, Stephen was responsible for attracting several high-profile investments to the city, including Skydance Studios, as well as developing a number of award-winning economic development programs for the city. Stephen also led efforts to develop Surrey's first 10-year economic strategy, which is currently in its 3rd year of execution and continues to be an effective economic roadmap for Surrey, even through COVID-19. Please welcome Stephen Wu.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I thank you so much to UBCM and Dale for the invitation to kind of speak today and kind of share a little bit of our story around our journey through COVID. I think, as we've heard from the previous speaker, COVID has definitely had an impact, not just on the Surrey, but, on all communities, throughout BC and Canada. And when we were approached with this crisis back in early March, one of the things that my team was actually brought into was our Emergency Operations Center. I was asked to lead our advanced planning unit. And at that point, I had just been asked to kind of take the training on EOC and hadn't really done it yet. And so I had to kind of flip through the pages and really understand, what does advanced planning mean? And really early on, one of the things that we were told was, make sure that the economy is stable, make sure that we are supporting businesses, and make sure that we understand what our businesses need. So if I don't mind, please, next slide. We immediately kind of looked at, creating a bit of a mini strategy. And what we really wanted to understand was the fact that our strategy was not going to be a glossy document. It isn't going to be one of those typical economic development documents that you would kind of be flashing around and selling your city. This was meant to be a roadmap. We totally expected that this roadmap would change over time based on what we were hearing from our community and what was going on around the world. And kind of similar to Quesnel, we immediately within, a day of the state of emergency being declared, my staff was already on the phones like a call center, calling up businesses from our entire business license database. And one of the ones that we focused on particularly was on manufacturing, given the fact that a lot of BC's manufacturing sector is actually located within the Surrey, Delta, Langley corridor. And for us, we really wanted to understand, how a lot of these businesses could probably play a role within our economy during COVID. Secondly to that, we also wanted to really understand what other businesses probably were going to be impacted the most through this, especially with Dr. Bonnie Henry announcing a number of measures at that time restricting businesses from opening and setting physical distancing requirements. And so immediately we also understood that a lot of our businesses in retail, restaurants, and a lot of those businesses, which we've been spending years and years and years trying to bolster in order to grow Surrey's vibrancy as a metropolitan center. And we wanted to make sure that we gave them the best chance of success. And so within 2 weeks of the state of emergency being announced, we actually launched our first core program. Next slide, please. And that was our store-to-door program. Essentially what we wanted to do was we wanted to really immediately go forward and give a platform where we can actually help promote businesses that were operating and encourage other businesses that perhaps didn't have an online presence to get online quickly so that we can also help promote them. So what we actually did was we actually created off of our investstory.ca platform a directory of businesses. And it wasn't just a directory of businesses. We actually listed out a lot of details of what they were selling. We categorized, and we talked to the business owners on what they wanted to be profiled. And within the first week of launching our program, we had about 100 companies. By the peak of the program, by mid-May, we had 230 companies on this platform. And currently, as we enter the second wave of COVID, working with our businesses, we will have over 400 companies registered on our store-to-door platform. And so when you kind of look at it, why did we kind of choose to do this? Partly it was because the fact that not only did we want to profile our local companies, but we also ran a number of marketing campaigns, and we hired a external marketing agency to kind of help us with that. We really wanted to understand that, one of the things that we learn in business is, in business school is, during hard times, a lot of businesses actually stopped their marketing efforts, stopped doing a lot of businesses. And so when we kind of thought about that, this is actually the time that we should be doing marketing. So we actually spent quite a bit of money through our partnerships with our private sector to actually promote the businesses that were part of our platform. And as you can kind of see here, people were not just shopping, they were buying, they were spending money supporting their local economy. And when you kind of look at the Facebook posts, when you look at the Twitter posts, whenever we kind of did our store-to-door campaigns, people were engaging with us. They were asking us, oh, can you add stores that could sell us games because we needed games for our children. We need, fresh food. Is there an ability for you guys to bring in farmers markets? And we accommodated a lot of that. It was a dynamic approach that we bridged, not just our businesses, but with our business community there as well. The second program that we really launched was really due to our EOC work. Immediately, I think similar to a lot of communities back in early March, most communities were strapped for finding appropriate PPE. When I talked to my counterparts of the province, I think we were joking that, this was really the Wild West of anything that we've ever done. Literally, I was on calls with provincial officials, with, Canadian embassy officials in China, in even at faraway places like Kenya, where we were told that there were warehouses of N95 masks made by 3M that we wanted to import here to Canada. And by the time we had finished all these calls, the entire warehouse was probably cleaned out by, believe it or not, and it's kind of interesting for me to say this, cleaned up by the folks like the CIA and other entities around the world. And so immediately what we realized was we needed a local strategy. We needed to kind of make sure that we can actually not just buy supplies from abroad, but we needed to also make our own PPE. So could you turn to the next slide, please? And initially, as part of our outreach, we had called up about 300 businesses across Surrey. We wanted to understand who had the capabilities to kind of manufacture goods. We looked at textile companies. We looked at companies with metalwork production. We wanted to understand chemical, disinfectant companies who were also in the mix. And what we found was a lot of companies that were in Surrey actually had a lot of ability to convert their operations to support this endeavor. And I'm very pleased to announce that, as of last week, our companies, as part of this program, has crossed the $10 million sales threshold, and we've produced significant amounts of disinfectant wipes, sanitizers, face masks, shield barriers, and gowns. And within the next 3 weeks, Surrey will actually start, launching and grand opening 3 N95 manufacturing facilities here in Surrey that will churn out up to 1.5 million masks a month. And this is all to support Canada's efforts in fighting COVID. So next slide, please. Part of this effort, I think, that we were actually really surprised with was the fact that actually businesses were quite surprised that we were, as a municipality, were kind of trying to help them sell their PPE, helping them kind of get their PPE businesses up and running. This was something that we had, like myself, I am not a PPE expert. I did not know a single thing about how to make sanitizers or N95s before COVID. And for me and my staff, we really quickly needed to kind of adopt a lot of those lessons, learn a lot of stuff, and try to figure out what role we could play as economic development in the city. So very much so, we saw COVID not just as something that was going to be detrimental to a lot of our businesses. We actually saw COVID as an opportunity for us to grow our business space. And from our interactions with our businesses and through businesses that were looking to establish PPE manufacturing in the Metro Vancouver region, we've actually not only exceeded our 2019 investment attraction targets, but have actually expanded the number of businesses that are taking up space in Surrey. So right now we have 25 manufacturers that have or that are currently making PPE with contracts with local health authorities, with local governments. We've got 41,000 square feet of space that is net new, that is being leased out as of the past few months. And $5 million in private investment has been generated. But the story that I really like telling is the fact that, it's not just about creating jobs, it's also about saving jobs. So many times when I talk to a lot of our PPE producers, the guys who retooled to make the sanitizers, retooled to make the face masks, they're the ones who are telling us that they are actually able to retain jobs, retain people who are bringing money back to their families and giving them an opportunity to also help fight COVID. And so when we kind of look at this, the economic output from just this one opportunity over the past 4 or 5 months of activity has been astronomical. Our projections and our market intelligence tells us that this pandemic, will last into 2021, and likely the demand for PPE will last until probably 2022. But our companies are now well positioned, not just for the current pandemic, but positioned for global opportunities as we work with Global Affairs Canada to sell N95s and all other classifications of PPE around the world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. So now please join me in welcoming Mike Gilbert, Regional Development Officer at the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality. Mike has lived in Fort Nelson for the last 40 years, working in economic and community development for the last 10 years, having previously served as an administrator and consultant in public, private, and First Nations environments. Welcome, Mike.
Hello, and thank you for the invitation. We're glad to join the crowd, quite an auspicious group, and we're happy to be in such company. Just for people that may not know, the Northern Rockies is a sizable part of the province, 10% of the landmass, tucked up in the northeast corner of BC. If you want a comparator, you could drop New Brunswick in here and still have room for Prince Edward Island twice. Or if you'd like a European reference, something a little more exotic, we're roughly the size of Austria. So our economic history, being the resource-based, multiple resource-based community that we are, I guess relying on cyclical industries, if you were to chart our economic history as a community, it would look something like a ride on the back of a dolphin. Hang on tight and up and down, up and down. So the recent public health emergency did not hit us the way that it hit some other communities. We had already suffered, and it's similar to the situation we hear from Quesnel, we'd already suffered the loss of two of our major industries and the weakening of a third. Forestry left us in 2008. Oil and gas, that was to be the next big thing. The LNG boom never really materialized. And while it picked up some of the slack from the drop off in forestry 2008, it also exited the scene to a large degree and left us with tourism, which had been a source of secondary income in a lot of ways, as enrolling a lot of people in our community that were now primary income earners. We've also had an exit of a number of very skilled, very capable people out of the community in search of work while their families remained here. So it's something that we've struggled with for quite a while, and we can claim veteran status in terms of attempted economic recovery. With that in mind, we did experience the impact of the current public health emergency, although differently, still significantly. And it became very obvious very quickly that we needed to address some immediate needs. We did so by initiating, as we've heard in other communities, outreach programs in cooperation with our local Chamber of Commerce that has continued to work with us. And we've seen promise that partnership has been strengthened. And what we did find, though, when we started that outreach was it confirmed what we thought we saw in many ways, but to a greater degree. And that was that the damage to our economy had already been done. And those businesses and fragments of industry that remained were hanging on, and they were dug in for the fight. Our attempts at recovery since 2008 have sort of resembled a Rocky episode where we get knocked to the mat and we get up, and we're no sooner on our feet that we get knocked to the mat again. And as we started to see interest in the restoration of forestry, which continues incidentally, along came COVID, and yet again, another body blow. This taught us some lessons, I think, so that up and down, that cyclical nature brought home the idea that diversification, which is, I mean, that's a bugbear of economic development. Diversification was absolutely critical to us. So we continued on with our established program of economic recovery and development with amendments to suit the immediate situation, but we pushed ahead, and we did so with the thought in mind that one of the key elements that was missing was specific intelligence on how our businesses were doing. The fact that it surprised us that some of them reported back to us that COVID wasn't the problem was pre-existing, really, it reinforced the fact that intelligence, that specific intelligence, was critical. One of the things that we hope to do as we move forward is incorporate the use of the BC Business Counts system into accumulating that and providing access to it for when we need it. We don't know what's to come, but that will be an ongoing exercise. The other thing that it reinforced to us is that while we had success with our outreach program, and it was very well received, as we've heard elsewhere, what needed to be kept in mind was that this kind of consultation with our business community and with industry operating in the NRRM needed to become a habit, not an event. So our outreach project was an event, and that was a good start. But we want to transform it into a habit, and we're going to have Dale and Colleen Bond helping us out in the very near future. We hope to develop some in-house capacity to be able to execute on that. On the subject of diversification, that diversification we also see not just across sectors. So we don't just want to make sure we have some forestry, some PNG, some tourism, and some agriculture. We want to see diversification within sectors. I think that's crucial for resilience. That the one big show, all the eggs in one basket mode of operation has not worked for us in the long term. We've had very successful boom periods, but when that boom ends with a particular reliance on any one firm, the crash is hard and the landing's not pleasant. So that's something that we want to do, is again, diversification across sectors and within sectors. Where we put our effort, because we do have limited capacity being the size that we are, is on things where we anticipate we can have the greatest impact. The LNG industry and PNG generally are very hard for a municipality to impact, despite the fact that we're blessed with terrific resources here. It's hard to move that boat. Where we saw a greater opportunity is in forestry, and we've put a significant effort into moving that ahead. We've also looked at what we can do in terms of tourism. We have terrific resources here, huge asset, and that needs development and focus. In the forestry case, to be a little more specific, we have formed a very good working partnership that we hope will lead to other things with our local First Nation. And we were able to secure, over the period of 3 years, the largest grant of tenure as a community forest that has yet been seen in BC. And we hope that that will give us some leverage in terms of developing the forest industry in such a way as we're able to influence decisions for local production with the assistance of the province and others. The First Nation and us have realized common ground in that respect, and we hope that that relationship will flourish. So tourism, as I've said, is a target for further development. Agriculture is nascent, but we have the same resources that exist and are working well across the border in Alberta. And we're going to look at developing that. And one of the means we're looking at to give us direction is what we're calling the Look North project. And what Look North is going to do is, in a nutshell, it will take what has always seemed to be an impediment to investment and development here, distance from market, and turn it by switching it over 180 degrees and facing north, investigating what it is that we have that we can produce that can serve the northern market, Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Alaska. And that we hope will also bring in, it will certainly bring in agriculture, it may bring in forestry, and quite likely it will influence tourism to a high degree. So there's much more of a story for us to tell. We're happy to hear questions from others, but I don't want to tread on Rose's time, and I will surrender the floor now. And anybody wants to get a hold of us, we always answer.
Well, thank you, Mike. And so now please welcome Rose Klukas, Economic Development Officer, our final presenter from the City of Campbell River. As EDO, Rose provides leadership and strategic direction, collaborating with key stakeholders to make Campbell River a compelling choice for businesses to grow. As president of Vancouver Island Coast Economic Development Association, Rose works with regional communities to encourage investment in the technology sector. Welcome, Rose.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. It is tough being the last speaker, and you'll see a reoccurring theme, I think, throughout all of our conversations about collaboration, outreach, communication, and diversification of our economy. So I wanted to speak briefly. My first slide shows a number of initiatives, economic development initiatives we're undertaking here in Campbell River. For those of you who may not be familiar where we're located, we are on beautiful Vancouver Island, mid-island on the eastern shore. And our history also is strong in the resource sector, and forestry and aquaculture and tourism continue to be strong parts of our economy. But we look at ways that we can diversify, and the way that we're doing that is through supporting growth in an entrepreneurial ecosystem and supporting growth in innovation and technology. And so our city has made some significant investments, including in our CR Advantage municipal broadband network. And we were the first community on Vancouver Island to make that investment. And as I speak through my next slides, we'll see that connectivity is one of the key requirements for business today. So next slide, please. So, you know, Dale mentioned it as well. It's human nature to think it'll never happen to me sentiment. And in fact, over the years, we've been looking at hosting business development, disaster recovery workshops. And on March 9th here, in collaboration with a number of community partners, offered such a workshop with not a huge uptake. But again, you know, it's sort of always in the back of people's mind. And we know that there are a lot of toolkits available through BCEDA, for example, and we're hoping that our businesses will now implement that component into their business plan creation. So we're all familiar with the term pivot, and we often think of it with startups or tech companies. We, as economic development professionals, have to pivot all the time. And of course, mid-March, when we were all sent home, and I think Dale referenced the BCEDA conference, and literally the week later, we were all remote workers, we pivoted very quickly. And by the end of March, we began to host our CR area virtual meetups. Twice a week, we offered to our business community a Zoom meetup. We all became Zoom experts overnight. We, by July, had over 21 workshops, and they were designed to be, we had guest speakers to speak specifically, for example, to programs that the federal and provincial government were offering to our business community, making sure that people had good information. But we also had hands-on workshops through this virtual medium to help people, create an e-commerce platform, or maybe they were already online but needed some help in improving their online presence. We also decided that we wanted to help our businesses. We wanted to create some unique shop local experiences, and one of them was to embrace our Vancouver Island Good Place brand product. And so as a city, we supported our business community that were eligible for this Island Good product. We supported a 1-year license, and as of last week, we were fully subscribed to that program. And that just brings some more recognition to businesses that produce product here on Vancouver Island. We pivoted. We work for over a number of years now with a company called Talent Collective, who provide coaching and workshops on HR and workforce development, an issue that's ongoing. We pivoted with them and asked if they could now instead provide some one-on-one support to our local business community. And I think one of the biggest things we've been offering our local business community, and Dale mentioned it as well, is our business resilience program partnering with Spring. And it is a virtual program and it has some unique features. We're able to offer it to our business community for free. And it has a number of components. It allows businesses to take stock of where they are today, make some adjustments and create a new plan, build resilience into the plan, and implement the plan. And the beauty of the program is if you're a mature business, you may only need to access some components of it. If you're a brand new business, and we definitely have businesses that started up right in the middle of COVID or just prior, you can access the whole program. And then another unique component of it is every biweekly, there is a provincial Ask Me Anything session over lunchtime. And our businesses are able to connect with the broader business community in British Columbia. So I'd actually encourage communities who are interested in that program to connect with Dale and the partnership that BCEDA has made with Spring. Next slide, please. So what did we learn? Well, I think we learned, we've heard from all the other speakers today a number of things. One thing we learned is businesses definitely want to stay connected. We took a little hiatus over July and August with our Zoom meetups, but we've had some clamoring to reinstate that, and we'll actually begin again bi-weekly in October. And it's an opportunity again for businesses to stay connected and for us to provide as much current information to the businesses as possible. But we also learned that, obviously more than ever, we need to support our businesses, and we need to do that in a creative way. And so we talked about pivoting already, and we definitely are always thinking a few steps ahead to see what's up next and how can we support those businesses. We learned that our businesses were fearing the loss of foot traffic. So if you're a bricks and mortar business, you may have already built up a clientele, and then after a few months of consumer behavior changing and people becoming accustomed to ordering online, we definitely heard that there was a fear that people would not return to businesses. So again, kind of thinking creatively, we definitely referred our businesses to Small Business BC and the resources and the marketplace that they offer. But we created with a local company that manufactures packaging, we created Naturally Campbell River Box. And we did spend some time trying to figure out programming behind it, and then decided we would just give the boxes to our local businesses who developed programming. And there were some really cool ideas. We have a bakery that said, for $40, you fill the box with whatever you can fit into it from the bakery. A butcher shop created a package as well for a flat rate. And people were sending the boxes to their tourists who couldn't come to Campbell River this year. And so that program, our local business community has asked us to expand that into a Christmas program. But for us in economic development, the biggest return of investment is that we've had a significant uptake in these boxes, but we have connected with more than half of the businesses that are now participating in this program are new businesses to us. And we're able then to point them to the other resources that we have available, including our business resilience program. We definitely heard, and we've heard this throughout this afternoon as well, that many businesses did not know how to access the government resources. Many were not set up to access government resources. And so a lot of people have great business ideas and not great business acumen. And so we will continue to support that business development mentality in our local business community. Connectivity, we know that having an e-commerce presence, an online presence is more critical than ever. So we are definitely supporting our business community in that. And you'll see I put on a Craig logo. I just wanted to talk briefly again about being creative and how creativity is critical. And the city has entered into a unique partnership with Campbell River Area Angel Group, where we're able to offer an Extreme Tech Challenge. And we've just wrapped up Nextream 1.0, where actually $125,000 in cash was awarded to some businesses to help their business development. And October 1st, we're launching NextStream 2.0, and intended to solve problems in the economy and grow businesses. So last slide, please. And as we wrap up today, I wanted to say that it ultimately, everything we do comes down to people. And I think the biggest thing that we've learned is, and as that we know as economic development professionals, we can talk about the business community. The business community are real people who are feeding their family, and we are spending our time with them to help them pivot their businesses. We've had some tough stories of businesses who won't survive this pandemic. We've had some fantastic stories where businesses have really been able to pivot and come out in the long haul. And, we know that people have invested their blood, sweat, and tears in their business development. COVID has definitely presented us with challenges, but you've heard this word throughout the presentations this afternoon as well. It's also an opportunity for us to address some of the vulnerabilities that we've seen in our business communities to create really a stronger economic future for our communities. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rose. So that concludes our presentation portion. I know that we do have a few questions that have been asked by our membership here. So first question is from Gary Holman. He's an EA director for the Capital Region. And he asks, are there particular strategies and examples for electoral, i.e. unincorporated areas? Dale, I think I'll send that question your way.
So good question. I really encourage like the unincorporated areas to work with the neighboring incorporated areas and vice versa to make sure that, and I believe I could be corrected with this with Amy, for an example, working, I do believe that you don't draw the line necessarily right at your border. And I don't think any community should, because people in the rural areas are spending money in the incorporated communities. But just because you're unincorporated, I'm trying to, think of a name, there are limitations. Okanagan Falls, perfect example. Okanagan Falls is an unincorporated community. There's no reason why a community organization, be it a business association, sometimes there isn't a chamber, or even a regional director pulling together an economic development group from the area, developing a strategy, developing their recovery plans for the businesses that are in their unincorporated areas. There's all kinds of things that they could be doing to look at. It doesn't have to be an incorporated community to have an effective economic development program or a recovery program for the businesses that are there. Anything that worked in Quesnel, or anything that worked in Campbell River or Northern Rockies can work in an unincorporated community, except in areas where you require specific provincial approvals like revitalization tax credits, those types of things.
Thank you, Dale. Our next question comes from Central Saanich, Gordon Newton, who's a councillor there. Those that engage the biz community directly, what was the best, most successful method? Call, email, Zoom, direct interaction, in person? Amy and Greg, I think perhaps that question is directed towards you.
Sure, sorry, so we just had to get off mute there. And Greg's still in the room, but for some reason our camera's not picking him up. So I can answer the question, I think. For us, calling worked really well during the pandemic because we couldn't physically go. I think following wildfires, or if it was a different sort of crisis, going physically to the business is nothing beats that when you can do it. And I know Greg, or Community Futures, the Chamber and the city have worked together on business swaps before. And we've asked our business community, how can we get in touch with you? And we're there in the business, and their response is always, well, just like this, come in and talk to us. It's the most time-consuming way to do it, but it's the most effective, and it gets the business's attention. They know who they're talking to.
And I agree with everything Amy just said.
Thanks, guys.
And I want to echo that too. Nothing beats face to face. And, you know, like we've all had Zooms. I mean, we're doing it right now, but honestly, nothing beats the face to face. It builds the relationships. And that's what business engagement's all about. You don't need a survey, you need a relationship.
Thank
And I
you.
think in Northern Rockies, our experience was that while non-face-to-face is always second best in terms of making sure that you have you can apply your resources and get as much feedback as possible and make as many contacts as possible. You sometimes have to sacrifice that as we did. We had jointly with the Chamber of Commerce, we had over 500 contacts that we had to try to make in a limited time. So we would have loved to make those face-to-face contacts. And I made reference earlier to the idea of making those contacts a habit. And I think our first priority will be to have those as face-to-face contacts.
Thank you. Rose, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would completely concur with that. In fact, we pivoted our Zoom meetups to our Let's Talk Business Wednesdays, and definitely phoning businesses and going in person, it really the simplest, most time consuming and the most effective.
Thank you. Stephen, I have a question for you. In your bio, it stated that you're in the third year of a 10-year economic strat plan. Has anything been removed from your strat plan because of COVID-19? Or things have just kind of gone around and been creative with it?
I think for the most part, we've been trying to be very creative with our economic strategy. Our economic strategy really was looking at how Surrey would be transformed into the next metropolitan center, the second metropolitan area for the Metro Vancouver region. So when we kind of looked at a lot of our key pillars, such as job creation, investment attraction, supporting innovation, and looking at our workforce, a lot of those things don't change. Actually, all of those things don't change. It's how you apply the situation to our strategy and react to it. And I think that's what's been the most successful about our strategy is we don't dictate specifically what exactly step-by-step you need to do. It sets very strategic objectives, and we try as staff to kind of reach those objectives however we go about it. And so when we kind of looked at our Surrey Makes PPE, we looked at all of our other programs. We have not needed to adjust our annual metrics for economic development. We have seen them to continue to either meet or exceed targets even throughout this pandemic.
Thank you, Stephen. So Dale, I have a sort of an all-encompassing question for you. What similarities do you see in the four communities to build back better and stronger in their communities?
Collaboration, partnership, working together, not just working in their own little silos. I think as, you know, we all have a tendency to do that, but we don't, that is to me the common thing. And then also engagement with their businesses and recognizing the value and putting the support on the businesses that have invested already in their communities. And I don't think enough can be said about that.
Thank you. So our time is running out here. This concludes today's workshop. Thank you to everyone who stayed and listened to these excellent examples of how we're trying to bring our communities back bigger and stronger and better. In appreciation of our speakers today, and with thanks for your contribution, UBCM has made a donation to the Souk Food Bank Society. The Society provides food hampers to families and people from Souk and the surrounding area, including Port Renfrew. The food bank also contributes to providing hot meals to local schools. I just want to remind our delegates, don't forget to take time to vote for third vice president. The voting platform is open until 10:30 tomorrow. Thank you once again and enjoy the rest of the convention.